At the prestigious Magic Academy, the elite hide their darkest secrets behind masks. Deep underground, two dark mages perform a forbidden ritual to revive the dead. Young Andreas spills sacrificial blood, while his master chants with a cursed skull. The corpse screams in agony as the ritual fails. Andreas scorns his teacher's incompetence. Another day wasted cleaning gore. He hates this life as a lowly assistant. At school, he's a third-rate loser. A pathetic coward living at the bottom. But a new soul awakens. 𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅, a war-hardened Special Forces soldier, reincarnates. A man of war trapped in a game. Now, a minor villain destined to die. He serves the cruel Ken, conducting human experiments forbidden by the entire world. Fate dictates heroes will hunt them soon. He must find a way to survive. 13 weeks remains. He possesses a dual-class trait, magic and legendary swordsmanship. The system offers a final choice. He selects the overpowered evolution trait, infinite adaptation. This power will help him shatter the wall of his destiny. Ken orders him to the graveyard, fetching bodies for another failed experiment. Failure means becoming Ken's next test subject. He has no choice but success. He finds a heavy knight's body, a perfect vessel for his hidden power. It's incredibly heavy, but he forces the corpse into the portable coffin. Suddenly, he spots a legendary grave, the tomb of a world-renowned swordmaster. A master who died of age, not defeat. A true powerhouse for his collection. If he can summon this legend, he will become an unstoppable force. Trading a royal ring for the corpse, he prepares his secret summoning art. Back at the lab, Ken mocks the body as useless, rotting trash. Ken leaves him in charge. One tiny mistake will cost him his life. The pressure is suffocating. He is forced to work like a mindless slave. Rage fuels his focus. He must master his new skills before time runs out. Can he control a powerhouse like Nickel with his current low level? He needs to start with skeletons. Evolution is strong, but he needs proof. He's broke and lacks materials. Then, a chilling voice calls from the shadows. How long must I wait? The captive vampire girl glares at him coldly. Angela begs for freedom. She promises not to kill him if he lets her out. Don't be Ken's slave forever. Andreas slowly approaches her cursed iron cage. Why did Ken lock her up? He searches his memories for the truth. The hidden records explained her power. Angela grows frantic as he remains silent. Why are you standing there? Do you still doubt my word, human? I'll free you, he declares. I'm done being a lapdog for that monster. She lunges forward in excitement, but he stops her with one final condition. Swear on your family honor. Swear you will never harm me after today. Her expression shifts. A vampire's bloodline oath is a sacred, unbreakable bond. I swear on the Lucy name, she says. The deal is struck. Her quick surrender is shocking. Suddenly, the system screen flashes before his eyes. Evolution triggered. Angela Lucifer has a 55% chance to transcend. He scrolls through the data. To her, he looks like he's stroking thin air. Since she swore the oath, he can apply his evolution trait to her. This is the perfect test. He'll experiment on her before summoning Nickel. Angela's patience finally snaps. What are you waiting for, you complete idiot? Is he lying? Andreas confirms. Agony explodes. She collapses. No response. Andreas panics. Success? A hidden potential awakens. If others evolve, I can transcend too. Summon Nickel. Massive mana drain. Flesh dissolves. Only bleached bones remain. Ritual complete. A legendary skeleton rises. Level 1 to 3. A monster awakens. Superior corpse. Retained martial instincts. Total jackpot. Beyond ordinary summons. Master stats. Peak martial mastery. Sword master. The skeleton examines itself. Finger wag. No. Will you serve? Agreed. Back home. 1 year left. Karen's fate looms. Survival is everything. Idle growth. Proficiency rising constantly. Field test. Nickel, come forth. Skeleton disguise. No panic allowed. Human attire. Nickel starts practicing. Undead training maniac. The Easter legend lives. Escape desperation. Teach me, master. Training begins. The skeleton agrees. Stiff muscles. Relentless guidance. Aura master tutor. Crazy pressure. Dual power path. Mana and aura. Legendary hybrid. Mage and swordsman. Brutal start. Limitless peak. Like King Amonono. Sharp pinch. Focus. Andreas yelps loudly. Powerful bones. Strict discipline. Special forces grit. Endurance test. Break time. Check necromancy stats. Proficiency, 22. Growth accelerates. Fast progress. 2 points in hours. Karen is quiet, vampire oblivious. Slow evolution. Plan holding steady. Nickel never tires. Eternal training. Potion needs. Recovery is fuel. Internal and external healing. Massive costs. Poverty's curse. I'll craft them. Not a game. Ratios are key. Potion class. Bullies whisper. Fallen noble girl chasing? Scornful laughter. Ignore the trash. Eyes on destiny. Weber's lecture. Plot remains steady. The professor drones on about standard recovery ratios. Andreas waits for the lecture to reach the critical stage. The recipe uses common herbs and 3 basic catalysts. Andreas realizes this contradicts his hidden game knowledge. Why teach such a flawed, side-effect-ridden formula? He stands up to challenge the Academy's outdated methods. Why ignore Hongzi and Matara root? He asks. The professor stops, adjusting his glasses with a cold glare. Why add such trash to a masterpiece? He sneers. This isn't a kitchen for your peasant soup, boy. The class erupts in mockery and cruel laughter. Andreas ignores them, realizing the world's knowledge is incomplete. It is clear the ultimate formula hasn't been discovered yet. Attending these classes is a complete waste of time. His internal database far exceeds these so-called experts. Relying on his own path is the only way forward. Expecting greatness from this academy was a foolish mistake. He leaves, unaware of the silver-haired gaze following him. In the research gardens, Andreas struggles with alchemy. Concentrating his mana, he attempts to brew the potion alone, but another failure notification flashes before his eyes. Thick black smoke billows from the ruined glass vial. Knowing the recipe isn't enough without the perfect ratio. Plus, high-grade ingredients are bleeding his small wallet dry. At this rate, he will be bankrupt before awakening. He needs a genius assistant, but who would help him? Suddenly, the research room door creaks slowly open. A silver-haired girl peeks in, calling his name softly. Andreas is stunned to see a high-tier character. 𝑳𝒐𝒏𝒆𝒓, the legendary alchemy genius from the game. Why would a protagonist like her approach an underdog? They should not even be in the same social circle. Waving away the smoke, she smirks at his failure. You have been failing for a while, haven't you? He stays silent, hoping she will leave if ignored. But Lucia is not one to take a subtle hint. What's the experiment? She asks, leaning in close. Andreas sighs as his quiet life turns into trouble. How cold! She pouts, sensing his blatant rejection. He just wants her to go so he can work. Lucia will not be brushed off so easily today. She leans in with a bold and unexpected proposal. Why not study with me instead, Senior Andreas? It is an offer most students would die for. Suspecting a trap, he asks what she truly wants. Is wanting a brilliant research partner so strange? You gain nothing from helping a failure, he warns. But she just smiles, eyes gleaming with hidden interest. She sees a spark of world-changing talent in him. She is searching for a miracle drug that doesn't exist. Andreas knows her secret and her tragic fate. He realizes she isn't seeking talent just for fun. Without a cure for her terminal illness, she'll die. A fate written into the very system of this world. Even the greatest healers have already given up hope. She is her own last chance for a future. The system has already marked her for a tragedy. Only a player who finished the game knows the cure. He needs her brilliant mind to master these ratios, but getting involved with her could be a death flag. She likely tracked him down after his classroom display. Andreas stares back, weighing the risks of this alliance. One wrong move with her could lead to disaster. Lucia just tilts her head, confused by his dark expression. He tries to dismiss her again, but she speaks. She mentions the peona mushroom, and he freezes instantly. Leaning into his ear, she whispers the secret ingredient. You omitted it in class, but you need it, right? It is the key ingredient only Andreas should know. She offers her help to finalize the perfect concoction. He remains cold, accusing her of acting on wealth. If you are done talking, then leave me alone. He won't gamble his life on a tempting offer. Lucia doesn't push further, turning to walk away gracefully. Think it over, she says. You'll change your mind. Andreas scoffs, certain he doesn't need her interference yet. Back at the dorms, his intense training continues. He ignores the distractions, focused on his ultimate goal. But the lack of funds is a massive wall. Progress stalls when you are literally too poor to brew. How can he make a fortune in this academy? Suddenly, A powerful sword strike from Nick startles him. The mentor senses his wandering mind and strikes fast. Andreas realizes he must find a way to earn gold. After hours of racking his brain, one option remains. A desperate, pathetic move he hoped to avoid forever. Asking his sister for a loan after her message. It is exactly what the original loser Andreas would do. Just this once, he mutters, swallowing his pride. But in the distance, a new shadow approaches him. A mysterious raven-haired girl stalks Andreas. Her eyes widen. Is the academy loser finally making a move? Carrying books? That's new. But in her mind, a leopard never changes its spots. He's still trash. Andreas walks on, his mind racing. He'd forgotten that Diana Anvin was a true magic prodigy. As a high-ranking noble, she could erase him in seconds. They were once close childhood friends, but the Cromwell family debt tore them apart. Now, there's only a cold, deadly distance between them. Andreas carries a dark secret from back then. If Diana sees him, his life might actually end. Desperate, he seeks out his sister for help. Night falls as he reaches the capital, Rodland. Amy greets him with a bright smile. She's missed him, even though he ignored all her letters. "I'm sorry for making you work," Andreas mutters. But Amy just smiles, her kindness never wavering. She laughs at his stiff expression. "Why so serious? Do you need more money again?" She hands him an envelope, fully prepared. "Don't just throw this away, okay? I'll pay you back," Andreas promises. Amy freezes, shocked by his sudden change in attitude. Her eyes drop to his hand. "Where's your ring, Andreas?" He quickly fumbles for a lie. He claims he took it off for safety. But Amy sees right through his desperate deception. Tears of rage fill her eyes as she storms off. Andreas tries to follow, but she screams. That ring meant everything to her. For the first time, he sees her truly heartbroken. He must get that ring back. He wonders, what is the point of living without family? In his past life, being the sole survivor was a curse. Now, he'll do anything to protect this bond. He accepts Lucia's terms. At dawn, the grind begins. But Lucia is being her usual lazy self. While Andreas sweats through hellish training, the spirit just naps. He's pushing his limits every second. Between experiments and training, he's exhausted. Occasionally, Lucia deigns to help with her divine insight. And by occasionally, he means almost never. She's currently wrapped in blankets like a sloth. Am I the only one working here? Andreas snaps. Lucia just yawns, completely unfazed by his anger. You're imagining things. Now, hand over the candy. Her laziness is enough to drive him insane. Yet, her instincts are terrifyingly sharp. She casually drops the secret to perfecting the formula. Less Matara, more toes resin. Her lazy advice hits the mark perfectly every single time. Driven by the need for gold, Andreas works tirelessly. Finally, the concoction begins to glow. Success! An intermediate physical enhancement potion. Lucia jumps, startled by his triumphant shout. Did you fail again? She asks. But Andreas just grins, holding up his masterpiece. System. Talent muscle alchemist acquired. A strange notification flashes before his eyes. What does that even mean? He recalls a similar message from his encounter with Angela. Can he actually upgrade his core traits? If so, he could evolve into something truly monstrous. The odds are low, even lower than his vampire evolution. But the potential power is limitless. Lucia wakes up instantly at the news of success. We should get this approved by the council. She's already dreaming of the profit. Andreas sighs, telling her to handle the annoying paperwork. Surprisingly, she agrees. Midterms are coming, and she needs to prepare for the academy's trials. Since you helped me, I'll handle this, she chirps. Andreas stares at her in pure disbelief. Easy? He nearly died brewing that. It seems her laziness knows no bounds. The train roars toward their destination. Andreas reviews his notes, focus sharpened like a blade. With Lucia's help, the first test should be a breeze. Then comes the dreaded magic tower. His swordsmanship and necromancy have reached new heights. He's ready to shock the entire academy. He thinks of Angela. Her vampire evolution is almost complete. He needs to check on her soon. Across from him, a blonde girl chats with Diana. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation. What do you think the exam will be? She asks. The groups are random, right? If we're lucky, we'll finish in a flash. Diana just offers a stiff, uncertain smile. The pairing doesn't matter, the blonde girl warned. But this is serious. She pointed at Andreas. His intense, stoic aura felt incredibly dangerous. A long-haired man shouted, Arrival at Ilan Station in 60 seconds. Get off, the proctor barked. The midterm exam rules are simple. Third-year midterms are group missions with randomly assigned combat squads. Each trio includes a warrior, a mage, and one elite supervisor. Complete it by Monday. Good luck. Andreas checked his list and froze. This academy was full of monsters, and his group had two absolute psychos. First was 𝑳𝒐𝒏𝒆𝒏 the fanatic, and second was the academy's mad killer, Vivian. Is my fate just trash? Andreas groaned. This team was pure chaos. As he cursed his luck, a blue-haired boy approached him with arrogance. You're him, right? I'm Christopher. We're stuck in the same group. Andreas responded politely. But Christopher's pride was already radiating off him. A mage training like a warrior? Pathetic. Don't trip over your own feet. 𝒂𝒏 smiled warmly at Christopher, but his eyes remained sharp and cold. An unfriendly warrior is a liability, 𝒂𝒏 noted as Vivian stated her name. Christopher snapped. Who are you calling unfriendly? I'm just being honest. Why should I tolerate a mage playing pretend? Christopher spat at 𝒂𝒏. 𝒂𝒏 chuckled. Strength training is for everyone. Don't be so sensitive. Andreas watched them bicker. This group was a ticking time bomb. With a thug-like supervisor added in, this was truly the worst team ever. Move out. Try to survive, the proctor shouted as the groups departed. Survive? Andreas worried more about his teammates than the actual mission. The trains sped toward their fate. The supervisor finally spoke up. She was 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅, the iron-fisted supervisor assigned to Group 9. Their mission: investigate a mysterious village within Baron Borik's dark lands. Rumors of murder plagued Thom village. A detective had already vanished there. The Mercenary Association requested an urgent investigation into the disappearance. 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 glared at the students. Andreas realized she was terrifying in person. In the future, 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 would become the world's youngest aura master. But right now, her arrogance was a massive headache for Andreas. Hey, seaweed hair, 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 mocked. Can a weak mage even lift a sword? Andreas smirked. Shouldn't you focus on your jerky to stay calm, lady? 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 fumed with rage. Shut it! 𝒂𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅, no smoking or I'll eat you. They reached Borik's castle. The Baron's greeting felt strangely hollow and cold. He explained the missing lord was his nephew, then abruptly ended the meeting. A butler whispered a secret. Andreas's sharp eyes tracked every suspicious move. My son is unwell, Borik lied. 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 thanked him and led them out. Outside, Andreas spoke. His nephew is missing, yet he's remarkably calm. 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 sharpened her blade. Is that why you wanted to leave early? A missing detective and a month of silence? This whole mission is bait. But the most suspicious thing was the butler's expression. A chilling silence fell. Wiping his blade, he asked if that was why they were fleeing. Andreas nodded grimly. The red flags were everywhere. A missing detective? It sounded like a fabrication. One person in a month was impossible. That was strange, but the butler's behavior was the real mystery. He flashed back to the moment before they left. The guide urged them to stay until dawn, but 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 sensed a sinister trap lurking in his suggestion. 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 prioritized the mission and refused. Andreas noticed the guide's face pale. His secret plan had just failed. Their desperation was palpable. Andreas observed their trembling hands and uneven breathing. They were hiding something truly dark. Every detail pointed to a conspiracy. This was no longer a simple quest. It was a life-or-death gamble. The group pressed forward toward Thom village, unaware of the nightmare that awaited them in the shadows. While the team discussed logistics, Andreas felt a chill. His SSS-rank instincts warned him of an approaching calamity. The atmosphere turned heavy. Suddenly, his internal mana began to pulse with a violent, rhythmic resonance. The closer they drew to the village, the stronger the vibration became. Then, the carriage suddenly lurched forward. The driver had lost his mind. He whipped the horses into a suicidal frenzy, racing towards certain destruction. 𝒖𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅 kicked the door open, her eyes sharp. She warned everyone to prepare for a devastating high-speed impact. The carriage flipped with a bone-shattering crash. They had arrived at the village gates in a storm of splinters. The driver was unconscious, but the villagers were worse. They were dancing in a macabre, soul-chilling trance. Emerging from the wreck, the group stood paralyzed. The sight of the dancing puppets was utterly demonic. Christopher turned to Andreas for answers. The young summoner clutched his head as the dark mana overwhelmed him. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. A high-level curse was consuming the village, turning humans into living husks. Vivian pinned a charging child to the dirt. She gasped. The boy possessed the strength of an ogre. Hage checked the boy's blood-soaked feet. He had been forced to dance until his flesh was literally shredded. It was a horrific ritual. The curse wouldn't let them stop until their hearts finally gave out. Hage realized the gravity of their mission. Christopher looked grim. The timeline of this atrocity didn't add up. If this started a month ago, they should all be corpses. Something was unnaturally sustaining their broken bodies. Andreas suspected a dark mastermind was protecting the dancers just to harvest their endless agony for mana. They were trapped in a vortex of madness. Ivy realized they were already deep in a messy trap. In the original game, Andreas would have died here. Staying at the castle meant a silent execution. By changing their destination, the scales of fate had shifted. They were now in the eye of a storm. This mana was immense. It felt as oppressive as Karen's, but the scale of this spell was terrifying. Could an enemy possess a holy relic? Christopher noticed Andreas's silence and asked what he had discovered. They needed intel fast. The group approached the landlord's manor, which loomed like a tomb in the dark. The estate looked like a set from a horror movie. Ivy didn't wait, smashing the front door open. They stepped inside, only to find the floor littered with corpses. The stench of death was overwhelming. Christopher found a body wearing Imperial investigator robes. This person had been dead for a very long time. Andreas realized this was beyond their pay grade. A powerful dark mage was likely pulling the strings here. Ivy demanded proof. Andreas explained that the magic was fueled by the raw, twisted emotions of the victims. If human suffering was the catalyst, the landlord was likely the first sacrifice to jumpstart this forbidden ritual. Christopher realized the charred bodies at the gates weren't random. They were part of a complex, dark magic circle. Ivy ordered a full sweep of the mansion. They needed to find the source before the situation spiraled. They searched every corner, but the landlord's body was gone. Then, Vivian spotted movement outside the window. The villagers were marching toward the manor in a trance. The culprit had finally decided to show their hand. Panic set in as those hollow, white eyes fixed on the mansion. They had been waiting for the group. Ivy commanded an immediate evacuation. Hagi scrambled to find an exit, but the paths were already blocked. Death was closing in. The frenzied mob swarmed the second floor, launching a brutal assault on Hage. Those lifeless, white eyes stared back from below. They hadn't just arrived. They had been waiting for them. Hage turned to Ivy for orders. She commanded everyone to cease the search and evacuate the building immediately. "Find an exit now!" she screamed. But Hage found a one-way ticket to the underworld instead. The cursed villagers swarmed the second floor with unnatural speed, launching a savage assault on Hage. Christopher intercepted the blow, shielding Hage. He roared for the boy to guard the others while he fought. A sudden explosion erupts. Christopher is hurled backward, his body battered and broken upon the cold ground. Andreas collapses in exhaustion as Ivy's voice echoes. With no time to waste, she makes a split-second decision. She hoists him up like a sack and dives through the window, narrowly escaping the approaching chaos. Cursing under his breath, Andreas struggles as traumatic memories of his past surgery resurface at the worst moment. He summons an earthen shield to stall the frenzied mob. Ivy shouts, questioning his reckless solo maneuvers. She warns him not to burn his mana. "Focus! Can you pinpoint the Black Mage's location or not?" Andreas smirks confidently. The culprit's mana signature is so massive it's practically screaming to be found. Activating his sensory pulse, he tracks the sinister flow. The target's hideout is finally within his grasp. 9 o'clock, 100 meters out. Andreas directs forward toward the suspicious building looming in the distance. IV rockets forward like a lethal projectile, leaving their gasping companions trailing far behind in the dust. They breach the lair only to find another victim. Ivy's eyes gleam with the scent of a heavy bounty. Andreas sighs at her destructive entrance. But as they approach the inner sanctum, they realize it's a trap. From the shadows, a bandaged boy rises. His hollow, white eyes fixate on Ivy as he moans in agony. Andreas strikes the magic barrier with everything he has, but the obsidian shield refuses to even flicker. Desperate cries fill his mind. Above, a colossal dome of dark energy begins to swallow the entire village. A haunting voice whispers of divine providence. Kneel before the embodiment of sloth, it commands with chilling authority. Andreas freezes. The mention of sloth triggers a realization that shakes him to his very core. This is Green Pata, a deadly game where the 7 sins govern the laws of the coming apocalypse. If these sinful relics are gathered, the ultimate boss will descend. They are the keys to the world's end. The fanatical mob closes in, but Andreas dances through their grasp. His mind is racing with impossible questions. This event shouldn't exist here. The original plot is warping, introducing threats that were never meant to appear. He rushes back to the group, only to witness Vivian transforming into a whirlwind of merciless, bloody slaughter. 𝒂𝒏 watches in terror. This isn't the Vivian they know. She has become a cold-blooded killing machine. Seeing Christopher discarded like trash, Andreas battles his conscience. He hates the necessity of self-preservation in this hell. Gritting his teeth, he informs 𝒂𝒏 that IV is trapped. The situation has spiraled beyond their control. The mysterious voice mocks them again. How tragic. Do you even realize you're slaughtering the innocent? 𝒂𝒏 panics at the psychological warfare. Andreas senses the mage is lurking right where IV is held captive. 𝒂𝒏 charges toward the barrier, leaving the rest to Andreas. He watches, hoping his comrade survives the betrayal. He turns to Vivian. Dark corruption is rotting her mind. One wrong move, and he'll be her next target. An ambush strikes Vivian from behind, but she counters with supernatural grace, shredding her attackers instantly. A masked figure in black robes appears on the rooftops, gazing down at the carnage with eerie calmness. Your only sane ally has fled, the figure taunts. Andreas scoffs, never having expected loyalty in the first place. The villain prepares for the grand finale. Let's see if your courage matches your arrogance, little hero. Darkness devours the world. Andreas is plunged into a void where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. He awakens on a blood-soaked battlefield. The stench of iron and death feels hauntingly real to his senses. A familiar face collapses before him. Run, Andreas. The dying soldier gasps, clutching his fatal wounds. It's his old comrade. But as he reaches out, the image shifts into the towering silhouette of his father. His father presses a heavy ring into his palm. Accept the Grongol legacy. Become the true master of our bloodline. Don't let my sins weigh you down, his father whispers. Take Amy, and find your own happiness. Suddenly, the battlefield surrounded him. Reality or nightmare? He scanned the carnage, searching desperately for his lost allies. Through the haze, a familiar shadow emerged. Run! The figure screamed, a desperate warning echoing from the depths of hell. Recognition struck. It was an old comrade. Andreas lunged forward, catching them as he screamed their name in agony. Suddenly, his father's spectral image overlapped the soldier. He reached out, pressing a legendary ring into Andreas's trembling palm. Take this, Andreas. With it, you are the true master of the Grongol bloodline. Claim your hidden power. Don't let my legacy weigh you down. Take Amy and find a happy life far away from this place. To everyone's shock, Andreas shrugged off the stagnation curse. He laughed at the mage's pathetic attempt. This curse is merely a cruel toy for the weak, he sneered. Your power is honestly embarrassing. Insulted, the mage unleashed a flurry of telekinetic blades. Andreas remained calm, his eyes cold and sharp. He danced through the steel storm with effortless grace. Is this all? He asked, mocking his foe. Did you think parlor tricks would work on me? I was forged through hellish elite training. The mage screamed for him to shut up, launching a frantic, uncontrolled magical barrage in total rage. Andreas dodged every strike. The mage wasn't strong, but ending this required his trump card, necromancy. The mage finally landed, demanding to know who Andreas truly was. Andreas simply gave a chilling smirk. In response, he summoned 23 rotting corpses. The mage paled. A legendary necromancer stood before him. Does the order know? The mage gasped. Andreas froze. A secret dark magic order actually existed? He sensed a golden opportunity to bluff. If he played this right, he could break the mage. I'm here to reclaim the page of stagnation for the order. Andreas lied with terrifying confidence. The mage roared in denial, unleashing a killing blow. But Andreas wasn't standing alone anymore. Nickel the skeleton appeared, shattering the dark spear. The mage gaped in utter disbelief at the summon. Desperate, the mage burned his entire life's essence to activate the forbidden page's ultimate power. Andreas analyzed the onslaught. The speed was manageable, and Nickel could easily tank the heavy hits. The attacks grew faster, but Andreas noticed a fatal flaw. The mage's control was rapidly slipping away. He hadn't mastered the power yet. Andreas saw his opening and commanded his hidden blade to strike. As the mage lunged for the kill, Nickel materialized behind him like a silent shadow of death. One clean stroke split the mage in two. The threat was purged. The bloody battle was over. Andreas realized the truth. A butler practicing dark magic meant the Baron was definitely involved in this. He retrieved a glowing artifact from the corpse. A mysterious box that pulsed with ancient, dark, energy. He couldn't carry it openly, so he entrusted the box to Nickel for safekeeping for now. Looking at the eerie black barrier, he wondered why it remained. The caster was already dead. Inside, Vivian was still losing herself to madness. He needed a perfect excuse for surviving this chaos. He couldn't reveal his forbidden arts. Andreas reached out, touching the swirling wall of shadow. Suddenly, the darkness swallowed him whole. He manifested directly in front of a trembling, young Vivian. "Are you Vivian?" he asked. The terrified girl shrieked, thinking the chair was talking to her. "I'm no monster," he lied quickly. "I'm a guardian fairy sent here to save you, little one." He winced at his own ridiculous acting. "What on earth am I doing?" he cursed inwardly. He witnessed her memory. A cruel noblewoman slapping the child. He was an invisible witness to pain. It was the Count's second wife. He finally understood the tragic secret of the BC family. They obsessed over a male heir for their sword legacy. Vivian was seen as a total failure. Even her mother loathed her existence. "You should never have been born," the woman had hissed. Abandoned and abused, the seeds of insanity were planted deep within the girl's lonely, fractured soul. This trauma would eventually lead her to slaughter every teacher and student in 5 years. "I can't erase your past," Andreas whispered. "But I can help you survive the future storm." "A fairy?" Vivian asked, her voice trembling. "Did you really come to help someone like me?" She burst into tears. No one had ever offered her a hand in this cold world. Andreas felt awkward, but spoke gently. "You possess a hidden talent that these fools cannot see." He told her she was a natural genius with the blade. Vivian looked down, utterly broken. "I've only ever been scolded," she sobbed. But Andreas's voice remained steady and filled with conviction. "Trust me," he promised. "I'll stay by your side if you keep our secret forever." Vivian agreed. From that day on, Andreas became her silent guardian, watching over her constantly. 1 month later, Vivian called out to the shadows. "Andreas, will you teach me the sword today?" Andreas emerged from the shadows, warning her to stay alert. His secret identity had to remain hidden. Under the moonlight, they sparred relentlessly. Andreas shared master-level insights, honing the girl's lethal potential. He was stunned. In just 1 month, she moved with the fluid grace of a seasoned warrior. "Even the swordmaster would be impressed," he praised. Suddenly, Vivian's expression shifted into a heavy silence. He sensed her insecurity, but her response was chilling. "No matter my skill, the fairy won't appear." Andreas stammered, caught in his lie. Vivian looked up, wondering if her own flaws kept him hidden. She feared her desperate struggle for strength was meaningless. Would he ever truly reveal his face? Suddenly, Count BC stepped forward. He demanded Vivian demonstrate her newfound power right then and there. Without hesitation, she performed. Her blade danced with a precision that left her father speechless. The Count turned to leave, tossing a rare word of praise. Vivian stood frozen in pure shock. It was her first time hearing his approval. Slowly, the dream faded, returning to the present Vivian. "I wish I could stay," she whispered. But thanks to Andreas, she finally found her own path, shattering the chains of her past. They both escaped the darkness and returned to the waking world. The truth was, out Baron Bollock was the mastermind. Ivy joined them, her eyes burning with vengeance. "Take the butler's head," Ivy commanded coldly, "and make sure his face remains perfectly intact." The group marched toward the Baron's estate, their killing intent heavy enough to crush the air. Christopher was dead, and Haza had vanished. The atmosphere grew thick with the scent of blood. Guards surrounded the mansion, but Ivy didn't flinch. She faced the battalion with ice-cold defiance. "Protecting a traitor is a capital offense," she declared. "Step aside or die where you stand." Andreas carried Christopher's body, worried Ivy might actually slaughter every single soul in the building. Ivy held up the butler's severed head. Terror paralyzed the guards, forcing them to open the gates. Inside, they found a nightmare. The Baron sat beside a grotesque monster, his own mutated son. Illness should have killed him months ago. Instead, the Baron had bartered with forbidden dark magic. Andreas understood the tragedy. Desperation had driven the man into the arms of the occult. A mysterious cloaked figure had promised a cure. The Baron would do anything to save his child. He chose a life of monstrosity for his son over the cold peace of the grave. It was a father's twisted love, resulting in a scene of pure, unadulterated horror. But Ivy felt no pity. She lunged forward, seizing the Baron by his throat with effortless strength. She hurled him aside and summoned the investigators to purge the creature dwelling in the shadows. Andreas moved faster. With a single stone, he ended the creature's suffering in a heartbeat. "Why did you act without orders?" Ivy asked. Andreas replied that dark magic must be erased instantly. He knew the Baron held all the secrets. Soon, the Imperial investigators dragged the traitor away. Back at the academy, Andreas and Vivian were summoned to testify about the horrific events. As they walked back, Andreas reflected on the Baron's fate. Dark magic always demands a heavy price. At least the son was spared the hell of experimental torture by the Empire's mad mages. Vivian turned to him, her gaze piercing. "You knew, didn't you? You saved him from more pain." Andreas played dumb, barely hiding the tone of the fairy from his own voice. Vivian's suspicion lingered. He sounded exactly like the guardian who had trained her in the woods. Suddenly, Lucia burst in, waving a device. "Andreas, you're all over the news. You're famous." She was thrilled about the reward and demanded a feast. Andreas's face went dark with financial dread. "The money hasn't even arrived yet," he muttered, while his heart screamed about his empty wallet. Lucia finally noticed Vivian. Andreas introduced them, watching the awkward exchange with a tired sigh. "Forgive my sister," he whispered to Vivian. "She's a bit slow on the uptake." Lucia finally stopped rambling and noticed Vivian. Andreas quickly introduced them as the atmosphere turned thick with sudden tension. Lucia stammered a clumsy greeting. Vivian replied with grace, while Andreas apologized for his scatterbrained sister's lack of wit. Lucia wouldn't let him go without a free meal. Andreas eventually caved. After securing her prize, she reminded him of tomorrow's Magic Tower meeting. At the tower, Andreas lugged a lazy Lucia on his back, regretting everything. He cursed his own gullibility. Lucia just told him to stop complaining. Inside the tower, the guide warned them. "The dimensions here shift constantly." Andreas told Lucia to stay sharp. Suddenly, she brought up Vivian's name. He dismissed her jealousy, but Lucia's suspicious gaze didn't waver one bit. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed. "You two seem awfully relaxed for students." A shadow descended as a massive eagle landed, carrying an imposing figure. It was 𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒂𝒏, the blindfolded master of the legendary Magic Tower. He sensed Andreas immediately, mocking the boy's clumsy nature just like his father's. Andreas tensed up. Why would a tower master greet a mere student personally? The insults felt intentional. Bath then turned his focus toward the young Lucia. Recognizing her noble bloodline, he told her to earn a name worth remembering. Andreas fuming at the arrogance. He'd heard these lectures 1,000 times already. Bath took command, dismissing the guide to oversee the final trial personally. Lucia whispered that the tower master was a monster wielding complex space magic. Bath laughed. "I can hear your whispers, little lady," he said playfully. They reached the 3 high judges. The trio of fortune stood there stunned. The mana potion trial was ending. Only the final oral exam remained now. Bath snatched a vial, downing the liquid to analyze its core essence instantly. He named every rare herb with surgical precision. A master's absolute insight. Lucia added the secret ingredients. Bath's lips curled into a rare, intrigued smile. He was truly impressed. Such talent at her age was practically unheard of. He declared them passed. But his sharp gaze suddenly shifted toward Andreas. "And what about this commoner? Is he just a parasite riding your coattails?" Andreas felt the sting. Lucia jumped in, revealing the shocking, hidden truth. "He's the mastermind," she claimed. "I was only his humble assistant." Bath's skepticism grew. He used magic to warp them to a private laboratory. "Prove your worth," he challenged. "Brew that potion again. Right here, right now." 5 minutes later, perfection was achieved. Bath had no choice but to acknowledge him. He confirmed Andreas's skill but questioned his unique use of pink skin herbs. Andreas explained how it stabilized mana. The judges watched in stunned silence. Bath stopped him mid-sentence. He slowly removed his blindfold, releasing a heavy aura. "Who are you?" he demanded. This wasn't the weak boy from his memories. Andreas stood his ground. "I'm the boy you once treated like a cockroach." A chilling silence followed. Then, Bath proposed a dangerous, life-changing wager. Create a new miracle drug. Success clears your debt and grants one wish. Fail, and you're expelled forever. The stakes were now at their absolute peak. Andreas accepted. In his eyes, Bath saw the ghost of a fallen legend. As night fell, Andreas sensed a presence. Someone was hunting him from the shadows. He ignored the feeling and pushed forward, reaching Karen's dark mansion. He handed the potion over. Karen's reaction was cold and filled with mockery. "A secret genius?" Karen sneered. Stop acting like a loyal little student. No explanations were allowed. Karen dragged him toward the basement's grim depths. Andreas sneered at Karen's pettiness. Imagine holding a grudge over something so trivial. He stepped inside. The chaos left Karen speechless. His secret laboratory was completely obliterated, reduced to nothing but ash. Angela was gone. Andreas realized the evolution was a success. His test subject had finally awakened. It was a shame she vanished. To Andreas, she was merely a high-quality experiment for his growth. Karen exploded in a murderous rage, accusing Andreas of tampering with the restraints. Andreas played dumb. With an innocent face, he claimed he only upgraded her. Seeing Karen's fury only fueled his satisfaction. Night fell as Andreas returned home. He had intended to discuss the sluggish curse with Karen, but the old man was too busy mourning his lost lab. Andreas decided to postpone the talk. Suddenly, long locks of hair brushed his back. Angela materialized from the shadows, ready to strike. She whispered softly, claiming she had been waiting to ask him a single, burning question. As Andreas tensed, she flashed a seductive, lethal smile. He silently obeyed her command to turn around. Satisfied with his compliance, she questioned his true power. Andreas remained calm, reminding her of their deal. He warned her about the price of breaking a blood oath. She ignored him, her voice dripping poison. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed. She detected a familiar scent on him, the unmistakable stench of a great sin. Her eyes glowed a terrifying crimson. Before he could react, her hand clamped around his throat like iron. She pinned him against a tree. "I have questions," she hissed, "but this place is far too public." She promised to meet again soon. Until then, she would master the terrifying power he had gifted her. She offered a twisted thank you for his help. Andreas remained unfazed, questioning the nature of her energy. Angela flashed her sharp, predatory fangs. "Don't worry," she purred. "I'll be gentle. You are my destiny." The next morning, DNA was busy preaching to Rutlick. The poor girl was practically begging for mercy. To avoid an information overload on nights, Rutlick quickly pivoted the conversation toward their latest exam. She asked if DNA heard about Lucia passing the legendary magic potion test. DNA forced a fake smile. While pretending to be impressed, DNA imagined the talented Lucia sleeping and drooling in the back row. To DNA, Lucia was just a lazy dragon. But Rutlick had an even bigger bombshell to drop. She showed DNA a newspaper. The Academy's biggest loser, Andreas, had actually contributed to Lucia's research. Rutlick admitted she thought it was a prank at first. The news was shaking the entire Academy. DNA recalled the fall of the Andreas family. He was a talentless trash who blamed his circumstances. Had that pathetic loser truly changed? She decided to see the truth with her own two eyes. In potion class, Lucia stared at Andreas. He was bundled up like he was facing a blizzard. He pulled his scarf over his nose, claiming he was sick. Lucia wondered why he didn't stay home. He joked about his attendance score, but the truth was far more dangerous than a simple cold. He had to hide the jagged scar Angela left on his neck. Her destined lover talk was insane. That crazy woman bit him and vanished, leaving him to sweat under layers of heavy winter clothes. The professor entered, scanning the room. He paused when his eyes landed on the overdressed Andreas. The professor remembered the newspaper article. He looked at Andreas with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Why the heavy gear, Andreas?" he asked. "Are you feeling unwell?" Andreas nodded, faking a weak cough. The professor sneered. "Research must be exhausting. I've already marked you present. You should just leave." Andreas stood up to thank him. But the professor wasn't finished. His true intentions finally surfaced. "I'm a bit hurt." The professor sighed. "You consulted me, yet my name wasn't in the credits." Andreas saw right through him. This fraud wanted to steal credit for work he never actually touched. "I am eternally grateful for your advice, Professor," Andreas replied calmly, his voice dripping with hidden sarcasm. "Especially the tip about Matara bark. Following your instructions would have turned my potion into literal soup." He added that the soup might have been tasty, but it certainly wouldn't have passed any magic test. Lucia suppressed a laugh, realizing Andreas was openly mocking the old fraud. The professor turned bright red. Andreas didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked out, leaving the fuming professor behind. Andreas ignored the whispers of those who once mocked him. Now, they were desperate for his favor. Reconciliation wasn't that cheap. If the old professor were smart, he'd stay silent, yet he won't quit. Just as the professor began his rant, Lucia stepped in. She shielded Andreas with a sharp explanation. As the co-creator, the professor was forced to listen. Lucia spoke of the fundamental alchemy they'd mastered. She clarified that they applied basic theories into their breakthrough. True research, she claimed, is solitary. Doing it without outside help makes the success meaningful. The professor's face soured as her logic hit. Lucia cornered him effortlessly. She added that they'd only seek his advice when he wasn't so busy. That finally shut his mouth. Andreas was finally free from the old man's annoying pestering. Lucia gave him a playful wink. Andreas felt a wave of gratitude for her perfect intervention. Elsewhere, the legendary aura master, Duke Sinclair Clutcher, was scouting for elite talents for the Empire. He was stunned that a mere freshman like Lucia could brew such high-tier potions. He demanded samples. His assistant handed over a small vial. Despite the tiny size, the Duke downed it immediately. One sip was all it took. He realized the potency was incredible, with absolutely zero side effects. Then, his assistant revealed the truth. Lucia wasn't alone. Andreas was the hidden genius behind it. The Duke hesitated. Rumors claimed Andreas was just a talentless leech using Lucia's noble family name. But why would a noble like Lucia credit a commoner? Their families shared no political ties whatsoever. Sinclair decided to investigate. If Andreas was truly a hidden gem, he'd join the elite recruitment list. Unaware of the Duke's gaze, Andreas pushed his limits. 10,000 sword swings were just the start. Exhausted, he reached for his secret weapon. His custom-made potions were the fuel for his insane growth. Without these, his body would break. His regeneration potion forced his tired muscles to knit back together. The healing potion erased his fatigue instantly. Developing these was the smartest move he'd ever made. The initial stress was gone. His path was clear, and success was finally within his grasp now. He laughed at his past doubts. Now, his success rate was perfect and his brewing speed was unmatched. If this momentum continued, his growth would explode. A perfect body and god-tier weapons were next. Soon, no one would dare challenge his combat prowess. He considered selling his formula to Ken next. Unfortunately, Ken was far away. Andreas found a note on Ken's door about an urgent trip. Had he really gone on a vacation without a word? The old man's pettiness was truly annoying. Shaking it off, Andreas focused on tomorrow's class. He needed sleep before the upcoming herbal medicine lesson. Morning came, and Andreas arrived at the academy. A sudden notice moved the class to the field. The professor purposely sent the notice via tablets, knowing Andreas didn't even own one yet. Petty move. Andreas sprinted to the outdoor site. He arrived to find students frantically preparing for a surprise test. The professor smirked as Andreas panted. He mocked the boy for being too busy for simple notices. Andreas ignored the old man's fly-like buzzing. He walked past him with cold, indifferent eyes instead. Lucia pulled him aside quickly. She urged him to finally buy a tablet to avoid these traps. Then, she explained the challenge. The professor had invented a new awakening potion for them to analyze. It was a blatant display of ego. The professor approached Andreas with a mocking, superior grin. He taunted Andreas, asking if a genius could identify the ingredients with just a simple snap. His goal was simple: humiliate Andreas and prove he was just a lucky fraud riding coattails. 4 hours passed in intense silence. The results were announced, and the entire class fell into shock. First place went to Lucia, naturally. But second place? It was Andreas, with a nearly perfect score. There was zero evidence of cheating. Andreas had proven his talent was undeniable and entirely his own. While the crowd whispered in awe, a student suddenly burst forward. He was trembling with pure rage. He screamed at the professor, accusing him of theft. That awakening potion was actually the student's work. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Whispers turned to accusations as the professor's face turned pale with guilt. Was the prestigious teacher truly a thief? Andreas turned to Lucia, his eyes filled with silent questions. Lucia's hunch was right. Andreas knew it was time to move and drag the professor's secrets into the light. Approaching the professor, Andreas questioned the potion's ingredients. The old man snapped, hiding his panic behind a mask of arrogance. Unfazed, Andreas pushed harder. He claimed that if this masterpiece were truly the professor's, proving its origin should be child's play. Panic flickered in the professor's eyes. Andreas smirked, adding that a true master would know every detail of their own creation. He challenged the man to explain his choice of components. Was he a genius, or just a coward clinging to a stolen legacy? The professor sputtered, claiming his status proved his innocence. But Andreas went for the jugular, questioning the sudden resin swap. The professor froze. He had been so focused on his flashy presentation that he completely overlooked that one critical detail. When pressed, the professor weakly claimed he switched to flower petals to save costs. It was a pathetic excuse for a master. Next, Andreas attacked the ingredient ratios. Desperate, the professor barked that only the magic tower had the authority to verify him. Andreas wasn't backing down. He demanded to know why expensive beetles were used instead of the cheaper, more common powder. Silence filled the room as the truth became clear. Trapped by his own lies, the professor scrambled for one last excuse. He claimed the powder caused hallucinations, but he didn't realize he had walked right into Andreas's carefully laid trap. The real reason that powder was avoided? Overheating it during brewing causes severe stomach pain, not hallucinations. The professor guessed wrong. The fraud was exposed. The students' respect turned into cold fury as the professor's earlier lies were picked apart piece by piece. Insults rained down on the disgraced academic. Desperate, he threatened to report Andreas to the disciplinary committee for his insolence. Andreas didn't blink. With the powerful Lord Anven backing him, the professor's hollow threats were nothing more than a dying dog's bark. The professor fell silent, defeated. Nearby, Lord Anven watched the entire spectacle, his eyes gleaming with newfound interest in the boy. He was stunned by Andreas's profound alchemical knowledge. Perhaps this underdog really could create a legendary potion before the year ended. Later, Andreas headed to the canteen with Lucia and Vivian. Lucia couldn't believe a hero like him would eat in such commoners' quarters. She stared at him, puzzled by his humble choice. Andreas noticed her hesitation and asked why she wasn't touching her food. Trying to act tough, Lucia grabbed a piece of meat, only to yelp in pain as the heat scorched her fingers. Andreas sighed at the pampered lady's clumsiness. "Watch closely," he teased. "I am only going to show you this once." He expertly dipped the meat and fed her. Vivian watched with envy, timidly asking if she could have a taste too. Andreas smiled and shared a piece with her. Their little group then headed back, enjoying a rare moment of peaceful camaraderie. On the way, Lucia kept pestering him about buying a tablet. To a rich girl like her, the cost was pocket change. But Andreas was on a strict budget and remained unmoved. Vivian suddenly chimed in, offering him a special reward of his choice. Andreas politely declined and parted ways. As he walked alone, a familiar, dark shadow crossed his path once again. It was Karen. The man had returned. As they passed, he coldly ordered Andreas to visit his laboratory the following day. The timing was perfect. Andreas knew this meeting was inevitable, but first, he needed to prepare for a different kind of encounter. Before meeting Karen, Andreas visited a legendary forge to purchase a sword. He knew Karen wouldn't hesitate to use brute force. Karen believed everything Andreas owned belonged to him. To protect the sacred scripture, Andreas needed more than just his magic. While paying, he ran into DNA. She was surprised to see a renowned mage browsing through a collection of cold steel. Andreas simply replied that a blade was essential for self-defense. He then noticed the ornate gift box she was carrying. DNA explained it was a present for her older brother. Andreas's mind raced as he recalled the tragic fate of that man. Her brother was the firstborn of the Anven family. In the original timeline, they were close before he vanished from history. He was a ghost in the game, dying during the year-end festival. Andreas realized the countdown to that tragedy had begun. He asked if her brother was preparing for the upcoming festival. DNA confirmed it, unaware of the shadow looming over her. "It would be nice if the three of us could meet again," Andreas said softly. DNA looked at him, sensing a strange depth. She felt Andreas had changed. He wasn't the same boy she once knew. Before she could ask more, he had already vanished. Inside the lab, Karen lamented his failure to find a substitute for the Angela material. His obsession with the church grew. He vowed to continue his search, driven by twisted duty. Andreas listened, his focus entirely on the hidden scripture in his possession. The game's plot was finally triggering. If Karen showed his true colors and demanded the item, Andreas's victory would be absolute. Once Karen finished his rant, Andreas dropped a bombshell. He revealed that he possessed the legendary Apocalypse scripture. Karen scoffed in disbelief. He couldn't imagine a mere student obtaining something so divine, something far beyond his pathetic reach. Without a word, Andreas pulled out the ancient text. "This isn't just a rumor," he declared, his voice cold and steady. Andreas attempted to hand over the relic, but Ken recoiled in fear, refusing the cursed treasure. Keeping it was a death sentence, so he ordered Andreas to trade it at the Holy Church. The boy knew this would happen. The man valued his own life above any legendary power. They set off as planned, though Andreas knew the church was crawling with dangerous high-level players. In a place where strength was law, he had to navigate these negotiations with absolute caution. Karen was already delusional, muttering about the divine rewards he would receive for the ancient scroll. He truly believed the treasure belonged to him, blinded by his own pathetic and growing greed. Andreas saw through the act. At the first sign of blood, he would be used as bait. Suddenly, the carriage lurched to a halt as a mysterious stranger blocked their path, seeking passage. The man boarded and immediately began complaining about the poor quality of their humble wooden carriage. Andreas froze. This was 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒌𝒆𝒅, a legendary titan known across the entire continent as a monster. Called the truth-seeking demon, he was a man who crushed every taboo to uncover hidden secrets. If 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 discovered the land scroll now, their journey would end in a total bloodbath. Sensing the suffocating tension, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 laughed, asking if his presence was truly that terrifying to them. After teasing the trembling Karen, the legend turned his sharp, piercing gaze directly toward young Andreas. Hearing the name Cromwell, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 asked if the boy had already begun hunting his own kin. Andreas felt a chill. Was this monster hinting at a dark secret buried within his family bloodline? Seeing the boy's confusion, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 offered a cryptic warning to struggle against fate as much as possible. Karen's panicked expression confirmed it. There was a dark truth being kept hidden from the young master. The carriage stopped again as a monstrous entity blocked the road, demanding an audience with them. Karen recognized the beast, ordering it to drop its disguise and speak in a human tongue. The creature named Dragan transformed, but his arrogance vanished the moment he laid eyes on 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏. Dragan was paralyzed with fear. He had come to steal the scroll but found a god instead. Ken pointed toward a massive, towering tree where Lord Mori was already waiting for their arrival. As they climbed the path, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 grumbled about the height, his senses suddenly sharpening like a blade. He sensed them first. Greedy dark mages were lurking in the shadows, preparing a lethal ambush. They were absolute fools to attempt a robbery, while the truth-seeking demon was standing right there. 7 assassins tried to retreat, but 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏's killing intent locked them in place before they could move. In a heartbeat, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 sent all 7 to their graves, ending the threat with terrifying, effortless power. Upon arrival, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 strolled into the inner sanctum, greeting Mori like a casual, long-lost friend. Mori was stunned to see the legend, who bragged about delivering the scroll in one piece. 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 then commanded Andreas to dump the severed heads of the fallen mages onto the floor. These were high-ranking dark mages, yet 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 had slaughtered them all like they were mere insects. By simply releasing his raw mana, he proved why he was feared as an unstoppable natural disaster. An impatient Mori demanded the scroll, and with a nod from Karen, Andreas finally stepped forward. 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 watched with deep curiosity, noting how the boy hadn't flinched once during the recent carnage. The boy had followed the order to decapitate the enemies without a single moment of hesitation. Noticing the boy possessed a rare dual attribute, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 leaned in and blew softly on Andreas's neck. The brutal killing didn't shake him, but this bizarre gesture made the young summoner jump back. Andreas questioned his reality, wondering if this legendary hero had some very questionable hidden tastes. Amused, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 promised the boy a single favor, a rare gift offered to the Cromwell name. This was a massive win. The truth-seeking demon was a man who never broke his word. His promises were absolute, upheld regardless of the chaos or the cost to the world itself. With such a monstrous powerhouse now in his debt, Andreas began rewriting his entire survival plan. As the scroll appeared, Andreas shocked the room by handing the legendary artifact to a lowly skeleton. Andreas refused to slip up against those monsters. Without a shred of hesitation, he commanded his skeleton to retreat. He drew his blade and plunged it into his own chest. Everyone froze as Me demanded to know his aim. With unwavering eyes, he declared himself the letter's finder. He demanded his contribution be recognized with absolute respect. The forbidden letter sat in his inventory. If he died, that legendary artifact would be lost to them forever. Andreas turned to 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏, calling in their pact. 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 questioned if he acted reckless based on previous words. What if it was a lie? 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 tested him, asking his plan. Andreas's answer was chillingly calm. He would do whatever it took, even if it cost his life. Seeing such resolve, 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 finally intervened. 𝒐𝒏𝒏 moved to annihilate them all. He finally unleashed the true, terrifying power of his legendary staff. Eerie demonic snakes coiled around 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏's arm. Terrified, the church members vowed not to touch Andreas. 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 issued a warning. Anyone who asked about this would be hunted down and slaughtered without mercy. Me asked if 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 would defy them for a boy. 𝒐𝒏𝒏𝒂𝒏 laughed. affirming his word was absolute law. Cowering under Salem's murderous intent, Mori finally yielded. He asked Andreas what price he demanded for the letter. Andreas healed his wound and faced me. Mori offered 5 items from a rare list, including high-tier corpses. As a holy order, they surely possessed elite remains. Andreas was shocked by the legendary names listed. The former Elf Queen Mylan and Tiger King Timer. These were SSS-rank treasures he had to take. A subordinate warned Mori that those bodies belonged to Monday. Handing them over would ignite the necromancer's wrath. Andreas realized Mon was the pioneer of necromancy. Tangling with such a monster would be a total nightmare. Andreas considered backing down, but Mon appeared as a tiny fly. Surprisingly, the legend told him to proceed. Karen protested, claiming Andreas lacked the mana for such dead. But Mon insisted, even offering a spatial bag. He told Andreas to take it all. Andreas was stunned by this generosity, but he seized the opportunity. After thanking the legend, he chose his loot while Karen fumed. The elder regretted not coming alone. Besides the 2 corpses, Andreas grabbed the Kajun gem and yin root, essential ingredients for his secret plans. Salem wondered why he ignored better artifacts. To Andreas, these materials were worth more than any common treasure. He calculated his potential. 4 high-grade potions. He also grabbed rare herbs to finally cure Lucia. With the trade complete, he handed over the forbidden letter. Immediately, Salem barked a command to leave. Before Andreas could react, Salem grabbed him. They needed to move fast. The enemies were planning a betrayal. The church intended to kill him after the trade. Salem dragged him away to safety at breakneck speed. Salem asked for a destination. Andreas requested the academy, asking to be dropped at the nearest train station. Back in his room, Andreas checked his spoils. He had summoned Nickel previously, but everything had changed. With 2 legendary corpses, he needed to evolve his necromancy first. Only then could he summon high-rank undead. He carefully stashed the queen and king. Suddenly, he found an unexpected bonus. Mon's secret dark magic book. It contained forbidden knowledge unavailable anywhere else. With this, he could transform corpses into elite summons. Suddenly, the system flashed. His skeleton, Nickel, reached 100% evolution with 66 potential paths. He had wondered when this would happen. It seemed the forbidden letter had finally triggered his hidden power. The status window shimmered with light. Without wasting a second, Andreas initiated the ritual to evolve his skeleton. As Nickel began to transform, a knock echoed at the door. A worried Andreas called out to the visitor. He opened the door to find Lucia's excited face. Meanwhile, Salem and Mon discussed the boy's future. Salem realized Mon was secretly protecting Andreas. Mon didn't deny it, confirming his interest in the boy. Necromancy is born from the pursuit of immortality. Salem still had many questions about Mon's true motives. He gave up on prying secrets. But one thing was certain. Andreas would become the world's greatest madman. Seeing his silence, the elder assumes Salem protects the talentless boy only out of duty to the Empire. Suddenly, the topic shifts. Salem asks a piercing question regarding the origins of the forbidden art. Necromancy. Necromancy was born from the desperate pursuit of immortality for loved ones. Yet the Cromgel mystery lingers. Realizing the truth remains hidden, the old man yields, but issues a haunting warning about the young boy. He predicts the child will become the world's most terrifying madman. Meanwhile, Andreas scouts the treacherous Blizzard. Andreas visits William to discuss a massive potion deal. The noble welcomes him with open arms. William presents a contract. He respects the main character Andreas as the master producer. The terms are insane: 60% profit. For Andreas, that is 3 million per unit. A total of 1.8 billion. He can hardly believe this sudden mountain of gold. 1 month later, the Everest potions become a legendary hit across the entire kingdom. From bloody battlefields to high society galas, everyone craves this miraculous new medicine. Demand skyrockets. The trade company expands production lines and high-end equipment immediately. 2,000 bottles sold in 30 days. It was a dream he never dared imagine. Selling potions alone brought in a fortune. His fame attracted massive noble sponsorships. His bank account hits 6 billion. Now, he must reclaim his family's stolen ring. Andreas heads to the National Cemetery to find Pan, a notorious grave robber. A mysterious masked guard stands watch. Pan claims he has hired protection against future threats. Inside, Andreas eyes the masked man. He knows Pan has dabbled in dark necromancy. But after their last clash, Pan seemed like a mere amateur compared to true masters. He was no match for Andreas. Still, the young summoner keeps his guard up. Andreas offers 5 million for the ring. Pan gets greedy, demanding the church's holy relics. Andreas sips his tea calmly and refuses. He will not pay a single coin more. Pan explodes in rage. The masked mercenary draws his blade, ending the peaceful negotiations. Andreas isn't fazed. He summons Nickel and asks Pan if he truly chooses death. Pan screams at the mercenary to kill Andreas and loot his body for extra gold. Nickel strikes from the shadows, but the masked warrior's reflexes are incredibly sharp. Suddenly, a sticky bomb flies at Andreas. He recognizes this deadly item from the game. It was meant to trap Nickel and pin Andreas down. Pan was trickier than expected. Andreas cleaves the bomb mid-air, then watches the epic clash of high-level blades. Nickel spots an opening, grabs the mercenary's leg, and hurls him into the sky. Nickel unleashes his aura, yet the opponent survives. Just who is this mysterious masked fighter? With a devastating blow, Nickel sends the masked man crashing through a window. Pan panics and summons a literal army of the dead to swarm the main character. Andreas and Nickel are forced apart. The endless tide of skeletons drains his stamina. Nickel gets caught in a blast. Andreas has no time to drink a recovery potion. His body goes numb. The situation turns dire as the undead circle their prey. Every muscle screams in agony. He fears he won't last until Nickel returns. An axe-wielding skeleton lunges. Andreas blocks the strike, but he is losing his strength. A heavy blow sends him reeling. Is this how an SSS summoner finally falls? He thinks of Ami and the sick Lucia. He cannot die in this wretched place. Willpower ignites. Andreas awakens his hidden aura, vowing to reclaim his rightful destiny. He carves through the undead army until they return to the dust of the earth. Nickel levels his sword at Pan. Andreas demands the ring, but Pan tries to bargain. No more mercy. Andreas severs Pan's arm, forcing him to reveal the ring's hidden location. Suddenly, Pan dies from a lethal poison. Andreas realizes the mercenary's blade was tainted. A master swordsman using poison? Andreas recalls a name. Pan whispered. Bloodthirsty Jian. If it really is him. Andreas picks up the fallen mask and puts it on. The mask shifts his appearance perfectly. This man was indeed the legendary assassin, Jian. In the game, Jian's future kidnapping would spark a massive war against the Empire. By sheer luck, Andreas just stopped a continental catastrophe before it could even begin. Resting in the infirmary, Andreas scanned the latest news. The chaos outside wouldn't reach him here. It was time for a major move. With a few clicks, he paid 2.5 billion won. He purchased a luxury mansion instantly. Suddenly, Hans covered his eyes as a playful voice whispered nearby. The mystery guest challenged him to guess who. Bored by his silence, Lucia finally let go, pouting. She asked what happened. He lied about overtraining, hiding the truth of the 2 lives he'd taken. Lucia warned him that such recklessness leads to death. Suddenly, Vivian appeared, rushing toward the bed. Vivian threw her arms around Andreas, weeping with relief. But this sight left someone else feeling quite unhappy. A week later, Andreas took Amy on a trip. She sat silently, her mind swirling with curiosity. What was her brother planning? He claimed he'd retrieved the ring, but this carriage was far too grand. Why were the curtains drawn? And how could he afford such an expensive, high-class mode of transport? The carriage finally stopped. Where are we? Amy asked. Andreas told her to simply step outside and see. A familiar voice rang out, making Amy freeze. Standing at the door was Lupin, their former headmaid. Andreas had rehired her. Amy was stunned, unable to believe her brother possessed such immense wealth now. She apologized to Lupin for her brother's delusions. But then, the view before her took her breath away. She stood paralyzed. In front of her was the very home they had lost so long ago. Amy was speechless. Andreas handed her a document, proving he had officially bought back their family estate. She initially feared he'd committed crimes for the money. Then, he showed her his legendary alchemy achievements. Tears flooded Amy's eyes. She remembered her cruel words from before and felt a wave of regret. Andreas comforted her, promising to be a responsible brother. Later, he returned to his dorm to prepare. He placed Tyr's corpse in a ritual circle. It was time to dive deep into forbidden necromancy. His second awakening granted him the enlightenment trait. This allowed him to master complex spells in record time. With boosted comprehension, he was ready. It was time to perform a high-level demonic summoning ritual. He decided to summon Tyr. He had meticulously calculated every possible failure 1,000 times over. His confidence was absolute. With dual cores mastered and nickel evolved, he only needed one more piece. With Tyr's power, he would become a one-man army. Finally, the summoning ritual was a complete success. The tiger let out a roar of absolute authority. Andreas's ears rang, thankful for his soundproofing magic. The next day, at the Vibo Snowy Mountains, the final exam for all Academy students had arrived. The professor explained the rules. The objective was survival and point collection for 72 grueling hours. Points were hidden across the mountain. But more importantly, their own bracelets were targets for theft. Any damage to a bracelet meant instant failure. Blindfolded, the students were led to their starting points. 46 hours remained. Andreas found a flat plateau near the peak, perfect for his tactical base. Nearby, he spotted Dian inside a barrier. She was attempting a wide-range search while maintaining a shield. It was a reckless drain of mana. Predictably, Dian's strength failed, and she collapsed in the snow. He could take her points and eliminate a rival. But an alliance seemed much more profitable. Sensing someone, Dian immediately took a defensive stance. Even seeing Andreas, she didn't lower her guard. Andreas pointed out her fatal mistake. Using such high-level magic carelessly here was an invitation to death. Despite his logical warning, Dian remained defiant. But in this storm, logic was the only way to survive. Looking for a tactical stronghold, he spots Dian nearby, encased within a flickering sphere of protective energy. She is recklessly dual-casting, high-level detection, and defensive barriers simultaneously. It is a fatal drain on mana. Though the shield holds back the storm, her internal energy is evaporating. She is pushing past her limits. Predictably, Dian's mana bottoms out and she collapses. Andreas realizes he could easily eliminate his greatest rival. However, a cold calculation stops him. Her assistance would guarantee him a perfect score for this trial. Sensing an intruder, Dian instantly assumes a defensive stance. Even drained, she refuses to lower her guard. Andreas scoffs at her recklessness. Overusing magic in this wasteland is nothing short of a death wish. No matter what he says, Dian remains defiant, clinging to her pride despite her clear exhaustion. Andreas feigned giving advice, but his eyes were locked on her artifact. Dian still underestimated his true power. Even at her limit, she believed she could handle a weakling. But fate was about to prove her wrong. Her last drop of mana vanished instantly. Seeing her vulnerability, Andreas stepped closer with a mysterious proposal. Terrified, Dian recoiled. "Stay back," she hissed. Andreas could only sigh at her blatant, lingering hostility. "Do you really hate me that much?" he asked. Skipping the small talk, he offered a formal alliance. Confused by his sudden change, she watched as he knelt, extending a hand like a noble knight. "Surviving alone is a gamble," he noted. "Isn't a partner better?" Dian knew he was right, yet trust didn't come easy. To her, Andreas was still just a pathetic, low-ranked loser from the academy. Her mind raced with doubts. Was he seeking fame, or was there a darker motive behind this offer? Suddenly, Andreas reached into his pouch, not for a weapon, but a simple bar of sweet chocolate. One look at her drooling face told him he'd won. Truly, food is the ultimate negotiator for her. Elsewhere, two demons compared their latest victims to a target photo. Their sinister mission was finally underway. They sought a blue-haired student, but the nearsighted red demon was failing miserably at his one job. The blue demon cursed the wretched weather and his life as a corporate slave to the underworld. Just as he insulted his boss, Kidwell appeared, commanding them to locate the target with extreme urgency. The red demon questioned why a mere student required such high-level hunters in the boss's personal presence. Kidwell silenced them. This wasn't their concern. They had orders to hunt the boy, not to ask questions. Bound by the chocolate bribe, Dian followed Andreas, stunned by the sheer confidence in his every step. Where did he learn such expert tracking? He moved across the jagged, dangerous cliffs with superhuman grace. Finally, she asked the burning question. How could a trash student possess such legendary, hidden skills? Andreas shrugged. If I stayed a loser, you'd be dead by now. He didn't deny his dark past. He admitted he was once scum who ignored his only relative, his precious little sister, Amy. But a sudden awakening changed him. He realized he had to grow stronger to protect her from everything. After a brief apology, they pushed forward, unaware of the deadly shadow looming closely behind them. Ivy watched from the shadows. How could the cold-blooded killer from the Bullock incident suddenly show mercy? Could a person's core truly change overnight just because of a sudden, mysterious shift in their conscience. 3 minutes to the peak, Andreas signaled, warning her to stay sharp for a potential enemy ambush. Right on cue, 2 massive demons lunged. Andreas reacted with lightning speed, pulling Diane to total safety. "Are you okay?" she gasped. He nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the monsters blocking them. The shocking truth emerged. The demons were there for him. They wanted his head and nothing else. "Let the others go," Andreas commanded. "I'm the one you want. Let's settle this in private." He tasked Diane with guarding the survivors, then led the bloodthirsty demons into the deep, dark woods. The demons thought they had him cornered, but Andreas effortlessly danced around their most lethal strikes. It was time. He summoned his SSS-rank familiars, ready to end this pathetic farce once and for all. The demons realized they'd walked into a trap. This wasn't a student, it was a god-tier monster in disguise. Within seconds, he neutralized them. He turned to his skeleton and tiger, apologizing for the short fight. Though silent, his summons seemed annoyed. Their overpowered master had stolen all the combat fun again. With the demons defeated, Andreas demanded answers. "Tell me, who sent you to hunt me down?" The red demon spat blood, laughing defiantly. "Just kill us already," he challenged with a twisted grin. Andreas didn't hesitate. Taking Nickel's blade, he prepared to extract the truth his own brutal way. Terrified, the blue demon folded instantly. "It was Kidwell. He's the one who ordered your execution." The red demon glared at his cowardly partner, but the traitor didn't care about loyalty anymore. "Why protect a boss who treats us like dogs?" he barked, spilling every secret he held inside. Kidwell hadn't come alone. Andreas realized a high-ranking association member was finally pulling the strings. He never expected Kidwell to be this bold, ignoring all previous warnings to hunt him down personally. Salem's arrogance was his downfall. His lackeys were far too reckless. Andreas demanded answers. The blue demon pleaded ignorance to avoid a clash. They triggered an avalanche to bury their tracks. Kidwell was playing dirty. The coward hoped for mercy. He rushed to help his fallen comrade, but Andreas never promised life. Blood spilled. Elsewhere, Danya was searching. Worried for Andreas, she climbed higher. The summit was close, yet empty. Suddenly, she stepped into a trap. A massive explosion rocked the peak. Dark figures emerged from the smoke. These weren't the same thugs. Kidwell sneered, mocking the little mouse who wandered into his ritual. "You're quite the bold brat," he laughed. Danya didn't hesitate to strike. "You attack first, then stay silent? Then prepare to die," she declared. Combining frost and blizzards, she unleashed a devastating dual-cast spell. Minions fell, but Danya's mana drained. Kidwell was actually quite impressed. "Impressive for a child," he mocked. Then, he fused with a floating eye. He transformed into a monster. Dark tentacles lashed out at Danya's barrier. It was forbidden black magic. Relentless strikes battered her fading defenses. Surrounded and exhausted, her mana hit 0. She couldn't hold on. A heavy blow sent her flying. Kidwell gloated over his revolutionary research. Danya struggled up, mocking his hideous form. Just a freak with an eye. Enraged, Kidwell vowed to tear her apart. The air grew heavy. She reached for mana, but her well was dry. Death drew near. Suddenly, a blade flashed. A mysterious figure appeared, severing the tentacles. "A mercenary from Rodland," he claimed. "Run. I'll handle this trash." Danya didn't buy it. "Are you insane? There are dozens of them." He didn't flinch. "Kidwell wants an avalanche, not just you. Move now." It was Andreas, hiding his power. Kidwell's rage boiled at the intrusion. "Who are you to know my plans?" The villain screamed in fury. Every tentacle launched at once. Andreas didn't even blink or flinch. In a blur of steel, he carved through the monster and guards. Even an explosion couldn't touch him. Danya watched in absolute awe. Before Kidwell could react, a lethal strike ended his wicked performance. But the nightmare stayed. The parasite eye roared, hijacking the dead corpse. It mutated into a colossal beast. The entire mountain began to tremble. Andreas grabbed Danya just as a massive limb crushed the earth. He hid her behind a rock. "When I open a path, run fast!" But Danya refused to flee. "I won't leave my savior behind alone." Using her final sparks of mana, she forged a weapon from ice. A crystalline ice blade took shape. She had to help him win. Andreas cursed her stubbornness. Why wouldn't this girl just listen for once? He didn't see her aiming. She waited for the perfect opening. The ice blade pierced the beast, finally exposing its glowing mana core. Andreas lunged for the kill. One mistake, and he'd be crushed. Suddenly, the beast turned. It began devouring its own terrified minions. Flesh turned to bone as it absorbed life force, growing even stronger. As Andreas braced for impact, a protective ice shield suddenly manifested. Radiant buffs of speed and strength surged through him as he noticed DNA nearby. She exhausted her mana to assist him. "Escape now!" he shouted, sensing her sacrifice. His body felt incredibly light, yet DNA's shield began buckling under the monster's force. The stalemate was dangerous. Andreas sought the core, but luck seemed to evade him. After a narrow miss, the beast was suddenly sliced in two with divine precision. Confusion gripped Andreas until 𝒐𝒏 appeared. Of all people, he had encountered her. With a chilling gaze, 𝒐𝒏 threatened to take his mask and his life. The ground quaked. Andreas realized mages were chanting a massive area detonation spell. Students would be caught in the blast. He warned 𝒐𝒏, but she remained suspicious. Calling his warning a distraction, she glared. He left the explosion to her and bolted. 𝒐𝒏 fumed but handled the crisis. Andreas watched from afar, trusting her strength. News broke of 𝒐𝒏's victory over Kidwell and DNA's rescue by a mysterious hero. Anticipating a chaotic aftermath, Andreas decided to stay hidden and observe for now. Approaching the training grounds later, he found 𝒐𝒏 lurking, her eyes filled with intent. She questioned why a mage preferred the knight's field, her frustration clearly visible. Andreas followed her inside, his heart racing with the fear of being truly discovered. When asked if he knew why she came, his straightforward answer surprised her. She marveled at his bluntness. Andreas then spoke with a tone of deep respect. "I have no desire for a mentor, especially not a woman," he stated boldly. "I will silence you," she barked, then demanded details about the demi-human attackers. He claimed he escaped while they were distracted, sticking strictly to his official report. He secretly thanked DNA for not mentioning that he was their primary target. 𝒐𝒏 remained skeptical. Andreas maintained his composure and requested to leave the area. Refusing to let him go, 𝒐𝒏 suddenly unleashed a series of aggressive testing strikes. Instinctively, Andreas parried the blows. 𝒐𝒏's face twisted into a knowing, triumphant smirk. "A frail mage blocking a knight's attack? There is more to you, Andreas." He played dumb, unaware that Vivian was hiding nearby, listening to every single word. 𝒐𝒏 pointed her blade, linking him to every suspicious mage incident recently. She suspected Andreas was the masked figure from the Balik incident all along. Though the voices differed, the silhouettes were identical. How did he hide his presence? She then asked about Vivian's change, suspecting Andreas had influenced her since midterms. "I rescued her," he replied calmly. 𝒐𝒏 laughed, refusing to believe such a claim. But for Vivian, the truth was revealed. 𝒐𝒏 continued shouting, calling his words nonsense. A failure passing through a master mage's barrier was simply impossible to her. Vivian stepped out and confirmed his story. "He really did save me that night." 𝒐𝒏 finally withdrew, leaving the two alone. Andreas quickly expressed his gratitude to Vivian. Vivian felt a surge of joy. Meanwhile, within the walls of a distant mansion, Amy was focused on piles of documents, searching for a single truth among records. A maid served tea, ensuring the household ran smoothly while Amy worked tirelessly. The maid suggested checking her father's room. Amy agreed and headed there immediately. Hesitating at the door, she finally entered the chaotic and forgotten study. Among the ruins of the room, she found a photo that made her blood cold. In the Welton territory, Han and Salem discussed a matter of grave importance. Before he could finish, Salem moved to the core issue they needed to face. He explained Mana's traits and how to assimilate two energies, simply called. 10 minutes later, his genius allowed him to flawlessly execute the theory. His innate talent was truly frightening. Every drop of energy was rapidly absorbed. As the master prepared to vanish, he offered one last command. "Tell me about my bloodline," he demanded. But the old man's expression remained unreadably cold and distant. He brushed the question aside. The truth was a heavy burden that the boy had to carry alone. In a blink, the master teleported away. Little did he know, he'd just been training with a legendary archmage. Finally heading home, everything seemed strangely peaceful. The house was spotless, thanks to the family maid's hard work. He found himself drawn toward his father's old study. Memories of a lost past lingered in the silent air. His sister held up a faded photograph. It was a relic of when their family was still whole. Staring at the photo, a storm of alien emotions surged. Was this really his life, or just a shadow? As his fingers brushed the frame, the room trembled. A secret passage groaned open. Reacting to his mana, he ordered his sister to wait outside. Whatever lay beyond that door, he had to face it alone. "It's too dangerous," he warned. The protective aura of a true hunter flared as she stepped back. Descending into the darkness, the pressure increased. A heavy, ancient magical resonance vibrated through the cold floor. There it was, a colossal tree bathed in crimson mana. Mythical flowers bloomed in the subterranean gloom. System alerts flooded his vision. This wasn't just a tree. It was the heart of the forbidden grimoire. This hidden entity never appeared in the original game. He was treading on completely uncharted territory now. He reached for a weathered parchment hanging from a branch. His heart raced as the truth drew near. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light pulled him in. He wasn't just reading history. He was living it. A vision showed a mysterious seed being planted. The cycle of destiny began with a single, dark pact. The sapling erupted with life, bleeding red energy. Even the Emperor watched the growth with pure greed. The plan was working perfectly. But for the man in the vision, it meant losing everything he loved. To protect his children, he used his final breath to seal the basement. The tragedy was finally revealed. Snapping back to reality, the pieces of the puzzle aligned. The origin of the Genesis tree was clear. "Are you enjoying my memories?" a voice echoed. A spectral figure watched him from the shadows. Without warning, the specter revealed his true identity. In an instant, the main character drew his blade. "Who are you?" he growled. The man sighed, disappointed that he appeared as a mere player to him. Then, the bombshell dropped. This man was the architect, the developer who dragged him into this world. He admitted it calmly. "So, how do you like the game I've built for you?" he asked mockingly. "What's your endgame?" the main character spat. "Why go through all this trouble to summon him?" "I just want you to win," he replied simply. Then, he began explaining the apocalyptic stakes. The protagonist wasn't naive. He realized the gravity of the situation. He had been a pawn all along. The Tree of Sin was the key to the coming cataclysm. Suddenly, a blood-red system prompt appeared. A soul-binding contract hung in the air. He had to link his very life to the Tree of Sin. The developer's expectations were suffocating. The main character felt a surge of resentment toward his fate. He was reincarnated into this trash body for a reason. Only his unique soul could host the tree. "What exactly do you want?" he asked. The answer was simple, yet it felt devastatingly heavy. "Become the host. Bind with the tree. Reclaim the power that was stolen from this world." "And if I fail?" he asked. "Then your soul will be erased from existence," came the cold reply. With no other choice, the developer's image began to flicker and fade, leaving him in silence. Alone with the pulsing tree, he tossed aside his gloves. He unsheathed his sword with grim determination. He cursed the man for forcing his hand. This was a one-way trip, and there was no turning back. He sliced his palm and pressed it against the bark. The blood contract was officially initiated. New SSS-rank skills flooded his system. He felt an explosion of hidden power coursing through his veins. "I'll take your power, and your revenge." Meanwhile, in the capital, the Emperor's rage was boiling. "Find that tree!" he roared. He was losing control, and his enemies were growing stronger. "Is this the best the investigation chief can do?" The Emperor's voice thundered with cold imperial fury. Sensing the gravity of his failure, the Emperor issued a series of swift, absolute commands to the shadows. Without a word, the man vanished to obey. Elsewhere, a secret conversation echoed through the dark, damp air. A young spy reported his findings to a mysterious handler, who joked about rewarding him with beautiful maidens. Seeing the boy's stoic silence, he teased him further. But this was no time for petty, playful games. The youth denied it instantly. He had been using Academy believers to track a very specific, high-value target. A legendary talent had appeared at the Academy. The handler wanted him recruited, but the boy shook his head. "I tried," the youth replied, "but he's unshakable. That man already walks his own path of absolute faith." Disappointed, the handler ordered the boy to manage things alone while he attended to urgent family business. Back at his manor, Andreas stared at his system. The root of all sin pulsed with a dark, forbidden energy. He feared the price of absorbing such power, but his sister's safety weighed even heavier on his soul. Once again, he was pulled into a dark spiral of chaotic deductions, trying to predict the coming storm. Snapping back to reality, he summoned a skeleton warrior, determined to sharpen their combined combat lethality. Suddenly, a violet surge erupted. New system windows flooded his vision, displaying upgraded stats and hidden information. Fully geared and reinforced, Andreas stepped out, blending into the city crowds like a silent, hunting predator. His eyes locked onto a familiar face, a man tied to the previous terror attack. The hunt had finally begun. Andreas tracked him into a dark alleyway, descending deep into the city's filth-ridden, subterranean sewer system. He encountered a guard at the entrance. Before she could scream, Andreas struck with blinding, lethal speed. As she collapsed, he opened a spatial rift, summoning his Dark Legion to dominate the underground battlefield. A skeleton knight and a monstrous beast emerged, their very presence radiating a chilling, murderous intent. Everything was moving according to his plan. He stationed the giant bear to guard their only escape route. Deep inside, the enemy was planting explosives. Andreas didn't give them a single heartbeat to react. He launched a surprise blitz. The cultist realized too late that an apex predator was now hunting him. Andreas unleashed a flurry of strikes. The desperate enemy lunged forward, but he was already a dead man. In a flash, the skeleton's blade severed his head. Andreas was stunned by his summon's god-tier swordsmanship. After clearing the bombs, a sudden impact shook the tunnels. His summoned beast had been utterly crushed. A man stood there, cradling the beast's head like a toy while whispering words of chilling, soft affection. Andreas froze in terror. He couldn't sense any limit to the overwhelming pressure radiating from this stranger. The man in purple turned, his eyes burning with madness. "Did you hurt my precious baby, Andreas?" It was Pat Corbon, a high commander of the cult and a legendary master of the aura path. Pat tossed the head aside. "Little brat, do you understand the price of interfering with my divine work?" Shedding his robes, the monster prepared to unleash a hellish beatdown on our trapped, young protagonist. This was a disaster. At this stage, even the game's strongest heroes couldn't hope to defeat Pat. Could Nickel and Timer survive? They were facing a mountain that no ordinary mortal could ever climb. Pat's physical reinforcement rendered all standard attacks useless. Andreas needed a miracle to survive this nightmare. Pat's skin turned black like charcoal as he entered a combat stance, ready to crush his new toy. The battle exploded. Timer charged forward while Nickel unleashed a relentless, high-speed blade dance. But Nickel's sword shattered against Pat's skin. It was like trying to cut through a diamond mountain. Andreas struck at Pat's throat with everything he had. But the blade didn't leave a single scratch. Pat hammered Timer into the ground before turning his murderous, predatory gaze toward the trembling Andreas. Nickel blocked a heavy punch just in time. Andreas seized the opening, striking the monster's nape again. He summoned an earth shield to block the counter, but Pat shattered it like it was fragile glass. Pat grabbed Andreas by the hair, raining down devastating blows until the boy's mask finally fell away. Pat froze, his expression twisting into a creepy grin. Andreas's god-tier visuals were exactly his twisted type. Nickel and Timer launched one last joint attack, but Pat swatted them away like mere, bothersome insects. As Pius pinned him down, Andreas felt death approaching. Suddenly, the system flared to life, activating the ultimate skill, Sloth. Clinging to his fading consciousness, he chose to trigger it. The cost didn't matter. Survival was the only thing that remained. Eerie sounds echoed as a mysterious crimson liquid surged from the earth, converging around Pius and Andreas in a bloody whirlpool. In a heartbeat, Pius was sent flying. Andreas's presence shifted instantly, his power erupting beyond any human limit he had known. With a casual flick of his finger, Pius's arm was severed completely. Then, the shattered earth began to rise around him. Jagged debris shot toward Pius like guided missiles. The villain scoffed, guarding the stones, believing Andreas had already reached his limit. He was dead wrong. Andreas coldly whispered that he needed to kill him quickly just so he could finally get some rest. The world trembled as his power exploded. The next day, Andreas arrived at the tower to meet Master Backer as scheduled. His guide led him with newfound respect toward the office. Backer greeted him with an enthusiastic smile, hiding his dark motives. The master demanded to see his potions, acting as if the sewer assassination attempt never happened. His poker face was flawless. Andreas wondered if this man was a family ally or the Emperor's puppet. Backer opened the bottle and took a long draught. He was stunned. Andreas hadn't just used incense, he had completely eliminated all side effects, perfecting the formula once again. Then, Andreas presented a blue elixir, the legendary Darren potion, refined to a divine level. Backer stared in absolute disbelief. To craft 2 legendary elixirs so quickly was impossible. Andreas humbly credited Backer's generous support and motivation for his success. Backer had to admit defeat. Keeping his word, he led Andreas deep into the secret warehouse to claim his well-earned reward. Inside, The hoard was staggering. Backer told him to choose anything. Andreas thanked him and began scanning with his system. The treasures were beyond imagination. Every single item he laid eyes on was worth at least 10 million gold coins. Walking through the vault, he discovered the sealed Galaxy Sword, a legendary relic he only recognized from his past life's game. He chose it without hesitation. Backer was baffled. He couldn't understand why his nephew would want such a useless, rusty blade. He had found it in an S-rank dungeon and deemed it worthless after several tests. He asked Andreas if he was sure. Andreas stood firm. Though he seemed as stubborn as his grandfather, Backer finally sighed and let him take the ancient sword. He also handed over an imperial invitation. It was a letter from the Emperor regarding the merits of the Chrome Gel family. Backer had held onto it while Andreas was unconscious. He also provided a recommendation letter for a legendary master of swords. If he loved blades, this was the place to be. Back at his lab, Andreas finally read the Emperor's cold message. The decree stated his noble rank would be lowered for misconduct, but powerful duke families had intervened to protect him. This was a blatant threat from the throne. Andreas immediately told Ami to report any suspicious movements from the palace guards. Then, he checked the recommendation. Backer wanted him to find an old man living at a specific point on the map. Andreas recognized the location instantly. It was the legendary home of Disran, one of the 10 masters of the entire continent. With Backer's letter, he could actually learn from the Sword Saint, an opportunity that was normally impossible for anyone to obtain. He decided to depart immediately during his next break. Deep in a desolate wasteland, Andreas flicked a pebble at a monster. A giant beetle was obliterated in an instant. After his battle with Pius, he had evolved, gaining the unique vessel trait. The boundary between his mana and aura had vanished. He could now freely convert energy between his heart and his dantian. This was the perfect version of Salem's secret technique. His energy reserves were now so massive that conversion was barely necessary. This breakthrough ensured he would never run out of strength. He began gathering materials from the fallen beasts as a precaution. Before meeting the Sword Saint, his plan was simple: hunt the legendary giant warrior and claim its power for himself. The journey of the once underdog has only just begun. Stay tuned to see Andreas reach the pinnacle of SSS rank power. That is all for today. Like and share to support our team so we can bring you more epic manhwa recaps. Who will be the next to fall before Andreas's hidden power? We will find out in the next exciting chapter. Thank you for watching, and see you all in the next legendary adventure.